This is Beyond the Weekend, a podcast of Cornerstone Church, where we dig into the things we didn't have time for on Sunday. Welcome to BTW. Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Weekend. I'm Mandy Fowler. Today I'm being joined by Pastor Alex Fernandez. Welcome, Alex.
Hello.
We're on week 5 of our Redefined series on Sermon on the Mount. And this week we got into a challenging topic, fun topic, money. Money was the title of your sermon.
Mm-hmm. And in some ways it was, and it wasn't about money, but, and I had mentioned that I actually looked back and just did a search on my laptop to see how many times I've actually literally preached just on money, and it was only 6 times that I could find. We've touched on it in
11
sermons.
11 years, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've touched on it in different ways where it's part of a sermon, but like if it was specifically on it, and I could be wrong, but that's all I could find, which is interesting because Jesus seemed to speak about it much more than that.
Right.
And churches and pastors, we all avoid it because it's an uncomfortable topic.
Right. And I think that's something that's, that is so interesting because if Jesus talks about it so much, why don't we talk about it more? Yeah. And I think it's because our church would be empty if we talked about it all the time.
Yeah. Because there is that perception that, and some people have helped build this perception that churches and or pastors are only about the money. It's only about your giving. And there's been some, unethical things that have been done to take advantage of people and all that kind of stuff. So there's skepticism
the jets and the mansions. Yeah. That giving specifically means give to this church so that the, pastor can have a Benz or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. That's not what we're talking about today.
I hope not.
We really start talking about, so for reference, so we've skipped ahead a little bit into the Sermon on the Mount. So we're into chapter 6, verse 19. Do not store for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Yeah. And then he goes into talking about having healthy eyes and serving 2 masters. So it's a rich passage. We talked a little bit, I don't know, as we've explained before, we team write. So each of us takes turns writing, and then the same sermon is preached at all 3 campuses, but each pastor or preacher gives a different spin and uses their own stories. And so I don't know what was used for examples at the other campuses, but you used a great example of a car that you had. Sure. You want to talk about that a little bit because I think it's a great image for what you're talking about. I mean,
even the setup, the way Jesus talks about money, if you hear you're sitting in church and we're going to talk about money today, I think instantly we all start to think, okay, you're talking about how much I should give, why I should give, all this kind of stuff. And so when all that kind of stuff. And then you hear Jesus puts money in the Sermon on the Mount and you're thinking he's going to do the same thing, but actually he really goes after the pitfalls, not so much the hows and the whys and all that other kind of stuff. There's more warnings. And, I've learned throughout my life that money and things and possessions and stuff can make you value and care about things like you never did before. And I use the illustration of my first car I paid for. I had a first car, which my dad's car and all that kind of stuff. But the one I've actually paid for was a 1982 Ford Escort, luxury vehicle. Yeah. And, I didn't value that car, even though I paid for it. I mean, it wasn't appealing to the eye. It wasn't like, whatever. And so I jokingly said, it would get washed when it rained. I would change the oil when the light came on. I loved the car because it got me back and forth to where I needed to go, including, early years in college. And then when I graduated, I was like, oh, I'm going to splurge on myself because I got a job and I've got this and that. And a car caught my eye, which was a 93 Mitsubishi Diamante, which, if you don't even know what it looks like, it just looked like a BMW. The style of it was cool. And I saw it in like a newspaper, and there's dating myself here. And I was like, oh, that's a sharp car. And I went, and it had the little price of what it what it would cost. And then it turned out to be a lease, not an own. And I didn't know anything about finances back then. And it's like, the leasing is like, here's how you can afford something you really can't afford, and you don't own it, but you rent it, and you still. And I was like, oh, sign me up.
Yeah.
And, how I treated those two cars was way different. And in reflection, it's like I started to care about that car and value that car because of what it gave me. Maybe I felt important or felt cool.
Status.
Yeah. And so money and possessions and stuff can make you value things that you didn't before. Because both of them were cars. Right. Both of them got me from point A to point B. It's just one of them made me feel different, so I valued it different.
Right. Which is such a great example, I think, of what Jesus is talking about here, about the ways that we can end up serving money if we're not careful. And that's a great example, because then that starts to become your priority. You're thinking about it, you protecting it, you're paying more for it. You're, all of these things start orienting around the car in a way it didn't when it was a cheaper car.
Right.
And that's how I think things work for us. So often in our lives, it seems like the more that we have, the more that we feel like we have to lose, and we can become more protective of it. We start to feel like, I need to put a wall up around this. I'm going to
protect it.
And so we see the kind of decaying effects that money and possessions kind of have on us. And we were talking a little bit before the podcast. In my experience, some of the greatest generosity or hospitality I've ever received has been from people who have almost nothing, like in a country like Haiti or India. People giving you, all the food that they have and making tea and stuff for you, and they have nothing, but they're willing to offer it to you because they're not grasping it as tightly, as you see here in the U.S.
And that's what he's starting up with. Don't store up treasure for yourself on earth, because that was just one thing.
Right.
And then you want to start accumulating more things. And pretty soon you're just storing up things for yourself.
Right.
And, Jesus warns, be careful, because those things will steal from you. It's like a thief who breaks in and just robs you of something.
Right.
What is that? I mean, it's different for every person, but that's the trap, is that we can easily get sucked into. And that's the world we live in.
Right. I really like that language of thinking of it as like a trap, because it is easy for us to fall into and start rationalizing things and thinking like, if I just had this, then life would be good. Then I can stop, striving so hard. And then I'll start giving it, nonprofits, I'll start giving to the church, or, then once I reach this place, and then you reach that place, and guess what? It's not enough.
Yeah.
There's always something a little more. And that's the lie that Jesus is trying to alert us to.
Yeah. It's the allure. And, it's not just bank account. I think we fall into it in careers that we chase. I use the example of some people find themselves years later doing a job they don't even enjoy because it pays well.
Right.
Or striving for that next promotion because they want to achieve something that they feel like will be of value to them. And then they realize later, man, I just traded work-life balance for stress and problems.
Right.
And so, it's the allure and the promise that's out there in the world that we constantly are bombarded with. And it's the messaging, especially in American culture, achievement means,
status.
a status and arrival and happiness and all these other things. And so everybody's like, okay, I'll go after that. And then they realize, some people, if we're not careful, we realize it didn't deliver those things. Even worse, it's taken from us, or now we're drowning in debt, and now we're not happy, or our marriages aren't happy, and it's just like your whole life is, and how did I get here?
Right.
Some of it is, what was I focused on? What was I going after? And some of that, the warning from Jesus is careful not to store up treasures for yourself. Instead, he says, store up treasures in heaven, which is kind of a strange concept for us, because, here's my editorial. There's a lot of pastors who've talked about storing up treasures for yourself in heaven means like reward later, or reward now, that if you give,
piles of jewels.
You get, if you're generous, God blesses you with more money, or maybe even in heaven, that there's a hierarchy of reward. And I can't speak to any of what is specifically that. I just don't know that aligns with my theology.
Yeah.
It's, storing up treasures. That's why I took it back to the Old Testament principle of the tithe. The tithe was a commandment that collectively the people gave first portions to take care of the needs, bringing heaven to earth, took care of the kingdom. God's people took care of those in need around them, and they stored up their treasures collectively to do that. And in the Old Testament, it's a commandment. In the New Testament, it kind of transitions to more just a natural response.
Right, a way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's no longer tied to like a percent. It's tied to like a characteristic, kind of like the Beatitudes we talked about. These are the characteristics of a Jesus follower. Here's another one. It's generosity as a characteristic of a Jesus follower.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this before recording. Like this passage has applied to every single culture, every time, every generation, including the one Jesus is speaking to, the first century Palestine, and then every generation since. But it feels a little more pointed for us now in a world where, there's so much materialism. We have, in our pockets, we have the ability to, purchase anything on credit, or whether we have the money or not. We could have a new car delivered to our house tomorrow if we wanted it. Like we have such a ability to buy, and it feels like money can master us so easily in our time and place. So where's Jesus taking us with this? Like, how do we help ourselves and each other avoid letting money become a master?
Yeah, maybe it's the second part. That the second part of this teaching is about the I. So first he warns us about the world.
Yeah.
There's trappings in the world, and then he's warning us. He's like, now I'm going to say, be careful about yourself, because you will deceive yourself. Yeah. The world's going to deceive. The world's going to throw a lot of stuff at you.
Yeah.
So be careful.
Right.
Because it's going to try to rob from you. But I use this, and like, who's the biggest liar you know? I am.
Right.
My own.
Yeah.
I can justify anything, I was sharing with Mandy a story. When the Nintendo Wii came out, it was like every family wanted it. It was hard to find. Nintendo
hottest.
Couldn't make enough of them.
Yeah.
And then we found out that on Black Friday, Meijer was going to have a few in stock. And so Beth Ann and I, my kids are, I don't know how old, but old enough that the Wii was like a big deal to them. We decided we were going to camp out at Meijer. Now, which is a 24-hour store, so you got to do it inside. But we got there at like 11 p.m. and then they were going to go on sale at 6. And there was a line of people, but we were up towards the front. And we camped out for this thing that we wanted so desperately to give to our kids because they wanted it. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
And then Grant was with us, and then so this is before I'm a pastor, so don't judge me too hard, but we had the opportunity. Every person could buy one, so I bought 3. I could care less really about who's in line
right behind you,
me.
The small child
there
behind you.
There was a limit of no more than 3, so they got a good truckload in. But I bought 3, so I got one for my kids, and then I ended up selling the other 2.
Yeah.
On eBay.
Great.
So it wasn't enough that I got the one.
Right.
And I was justifying this, like, it will help pay for Christmas. It will help. I'm justifying this bad behavior. It was bad enough that I was there camping out for a video game system. I had already justified that. But now when I found out we could get more, now I'm justifying like how this could pay for Christmas and blah, blah, blah. That's how fast it can happen.
Right.
And so how do you avoid that? You've got to just realize that these traps are out there, and you've got to do some hard self-reflection.
Right.
And, I used the example, I did this years ago, examine where your money's going. I think it's just a good principle because it'll tell you a story.
Right.
Because especially today. You know, there used to be, you know, again, dating myself, like checkbooks were a thing, and you'd write down what you wrote a check for, and you could just, you just could see where the flow of money was going. But then now with plastic, you can end up spending, and, you know, push the button here, stop at the fast food thing here, do all these things we
without
call
even
life.
thinking about it.
And then at the end of the week or the end of the month, if you don't really pay attention to it, you can really lose control and lose sight of it, right? And so that's what Jesus is talking about, the healthy eye versus the unhealthy eye. So just keep watch of yourself, of what you're doing, what you're valuing. And sometimes it's startling, you know, how much I was spending. I use COVID as an example. It just became obvious because you couldn't go buy anything and everything you wanted or do what you wanted. And so there just was extra money there. And I'm like, wow, we do eat out a lot, or I do have just dumb spending that I do. And that was just a few years ago.
Right.
You know, it doesn't mean don't go eat out. Doesn't mean don't go have fun. Do you lose sight of it?
Right. Yeah, it's more about our perspective. It's not like Jesus is saying like, you better not spend $1 on anything fun.
Right.
You should all go to the poor. You know, like that isn't what Jesus is saying here, but that we have to be careful because we are so easily deceived. We can easily get off course, I think, with this and start telling ourselves a story about, you know, why this is justified and why we need to do this. And, you know, like you said, we're so good at lying to ourselves.
Yeah, I can justify anything.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to sports, it's like I open my wallet, like, how much are the tickets? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to be there. And
can't put a price on an experience.
No thought in that. But, you know, at the same time, I'm going through the supermarket comparing like sale items to the other. It's like, I'm the same person. What's going on here? You know, I justified the one.
Right.
You know?
Well, and it's challenging because we realize, so Jesus is speaking to people who, you know, have no money and people who have some money and people who have a lot of money. So this is regardless of where you're at. You know, I think we can every single tax bracket can have a healthy or unhealthy relationship with money. I think it's something that we need to kind of continuously check in with ourselves about, because living where we do, when we do, it is so easy, like you said, to just sort of fall into patterns and not even realize it. And then all of a sudden we feel like, oh, well, you know, things, I don't have enough money to give to a good cause or to give to the church. You know, I don't have anything left over. And meanwhile, we've developed this sort of like unhealthy pattern in our life where we're in trouble, we're spiraling with some debt, or, you know, there's all kinds of, we're kind of casting a wide net here. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I'm just struggling day to day, and you're talking to me about being generous, you know, like that's not really my reality. So I'm going to kind of tune you out. Or maybe like, what is Jesus saying to me if I'm struggling with money? What would you say to somebody like that? If
you're a person, you know, in your situation has you struggling to paycheck, and you're just looking at like, I'm just focused on getting food on the table for my kids and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not at the heart of what Jesus is talking about here. But it doesn't matter, kind of what you said, it doesn't matter what you make or what you give. This is the distinction. It's we're all in this situation where this is going to be coming at us, and we're all in a place where generosity could be something that we participate with. But maybe you're in a situation where you just need help gaining control of the finances, or you're just struggling. And I think what I want people to know is, you know, this isn't a message about give to the church. This isn't a message about, you know, Jesus says you should be generous, so, you know, be generous, because some people may feel like they can't. In fact, I think that's a lot of people. It's certainly a lot of people in America, and I think our people at Cornerstone represent America.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a situation where you're stuck or spiraling and you don't know how to even get above water, you know, it doesn't matter how you got there. It matters now that's your reality. And, you know, we have some resources at Cornerstone that, regardless of giving and generosity, want to and are available for free to help a person look at their financial situation and build a plan, you know, help them understand the flow. If that's not your gift, it's not a lot of people's gift,
right?
Is just how do I get to stability in my life?
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you're listening and you're like, I can't even think about generosity, that's okay.
Yeah.
You just want to you want stability. And we have some people here at Cornerstone who love to pour into as their ministry, helping people find a way towards stability.
Right.
And also, what resources do we have as a church to care for people who are in those situations? We have a benevolence fund that helps with, if you've been hit with a medical thing that's just overwhelming, or you're really struggling with, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. Understand that we're a church that some of the funds that come through generosity are here for people, whether you're part of our congregation or not.
Yeah.
Like you got a family member who's underwater, come see us, and we have resources and people who will help look at the situation and see what we can do. And so that's my encouragement, is just don't sit there and try to tread water.
Right.
Be okay with asking for help.
Right. Well, and this is a source, Jesus acknowledges this is a source of fear and worry for us. Spoiler alert, we will be getting to that passage in 2 weeks. Because we're going to skip backwards now next week. But Jesus, I think the point of all of this is like Jesus understands us.
Yeah.
He understands
way more than we think.
Yeah, way more. And he understands, and that's why he's trying to give us these warnings about the pitfalls that we can easily fall into.
And he cares about us.
He does, deeply. And so this is the words of a God who understands where we're coming from and isn't trying to shame us or tisk. You spent money on 3 Nintendo Wiis. Yeah. Even though 2 were for resale. Right. That's not how God is thinking of us, or you should be better with your money. That's not what Jesus is doing here. He's just trying to give us some guidelines for how to have his perspective about money.
Yeah, and the care is that money is so powerful. It can influence us in ways that we are totally unaware of.
Right.
And we can think we have control of it, and pretty soon it sweeps us away.
Right.
And it's the we, and then it's something else, and then it's the debt, and all of a sudden we're underwater. And that's the care.
Yeah.
That's the warning that Jesus is saying. It's be careful, because you can easily get caught up worshiping something else than me.
Right.
And you not even recognize it.
Yeah.
And money is one of those things, or the things that money can get you are those things. And so it's out of care that he gives us these words, because it's a warning. And so why the warning? It's not warning like for condemnation purpose.
Right.
It's like warning to protect. Like it's
Look
kind
out.
of warning. Yeah.
Watch out. Yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy.
There's a cliff of us, here, and
we can all fall.
Yeah.
We can all fall into this
yes.
at any point. Doesn't matter how much margin you have. Doesn't matter how much money you have. These things are constantly 2 things we battle: the world and ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, great conversation. There's so much more here we could talk about. The big takeaway is that Jesus cares so deeply about these things that he spends time talking to us about them, and it's worth our while to unpack them and see how they relate to our lives. So we hope you will continue to listen to the service. Don't miss a message, because we are jumping around a little bit, so you need to stick with us so you get we're getting through the whole sermon. But I hope you will listen to the podcast, do the message discussion guide, do the Bible reading plan. We need as much help as we can get to get through these challenging words of Jesus. So we hope you continue to participate in that. Thanks a lot, Alex.
Love doing it.
We'll talk to you next week. Beyond the Weekend is a podcast of Cornerstone Church, a multi-site church in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. Please follow for more episodes and sermons, or find us online at www.cornerstonemi.org. Thanks for listening.